Oh, either way, I can turn my
Oh,
pocket.
okay.
This is all impromptu.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Hey, welcome everybody. I better
Hi.
speak into this
Yes,
and
you
not make
better
the same
speak
mistake as
into
last
the
time.
microphone.
That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We are not microphone experts, but we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting
We're,
better.
we're slowly getting better. So,
Yes.
so welcome to another broadcast of Treble with Missy and Thor. And this is Missy, and I'm Thor.
Hi.
And we are here in Chico, California. We do a music podcast every week for anybody who's watching this for the first time. And if you're a returning viewer, where have you been all my life? I miss you. So,
Yes,
is that okay?
absolutely.
So we are, as I mentioned, we are actually in Apollo Music and Arts, which is a piano gallery here in Chico. And Missy, do you want to say a few things about
Yes.
that?
I was just back there speaking to Vince Chambers. He is the owner of Apollo, and he's got some wonderful things planned for musical theater. But they also do all sorts of things here, like all sorts of different instruments. As you can see, there's a drum set behind us. There's guitars on the left and the right. He's a certified Yamaha piano dealer, and they also do lessons and other things here too. So check it out. They're on Mangrove here in Chico, California.
Yep.
So, anyways, so what are we going to be talking about today,
Well,
Thor?
that's a really good question.
Or this evening?
Or this evening, today, this morning.
It's
Yeah.
been a long day.
Hey, it's morning somewhere.
Yes.
Right? China, I think. Maybe. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, we, as some people know, we actually we skipped last week because there was a lot of smoke out there, and we wanted to not be out in the smoke. So, but the one we did the week prior to that, our podcast was about practice and the importance of practice. And Missy offered a lot of really good insight in terms of, like if you have kids that are taking music lessons privately, and how to integrate their practice time into their school schedule,
Yes.
which I thought was really cool
Yes.
because a lot of the kids are already doing distance learning anyway because of
Yes.
the pandemic. So
Yes.
so you offered some really cool, interesting things. Actually, I offered some of that
Exactly.
advice today to one of my students.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
Good.
I was like, I didn't mention your name, but I was like,
Yes.
someone told me that this is actually a good way of doing it. So
The snarky piano teacher.
yes, the smart. Yeah, we are both very snarky.
I don't know if you haven't seen the bloopers. Check it out.
Yeah,
It's in there.
it is a pretty snarky. Well, it's not that bad.
It's not too snarky.
It'll probably get more and more, snarky as we go along. But anyway, yeah. So she offered some very good advice. The tips that I offered were kind of revolved around the importance of consistently practicing your instrument, whether you are a music student or if you are just a performer or you just play for fun as a hobby. And the fact that if you play consistently for a number of years, like 3 or 4 years, and you play every day,
Exactly.
like you make it a daily habit,
Yes.
you can get really good to the point where people will actually find it mind-boggling. They will actually look at it and be like, how did you get that good?
Yes.
And the secret is how much time you spend on the instrument. So if you haven't watched that podcast, we still have it on our YouTube channel, so you can still watch it and get that same information. So
exactly.
so all these podcasts just stay on there. We don't delete them unless Missy says no, delete that. I'm like, oh, I will. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not that bossy.
Yes. So anyway, so today is part 2 of that. We're just going to continue that discussion.
Exactly.
And I know you have some things that you want to talk about, and I know I have things that I want to talk about.
Absolutely. Why don't you go first?
You want to go first? Yeah, I'm
yes.
going to go first, and then we'll just hand it over to you. And
yeah, go ahead.
And yeah, so I think part of see, now I'm kind of thinking on the spot, and you're like looking at me like, what am I going to talk about?
You already knew what you were.
I did, and I forgot. Yeah.
Yes.
Because we were a little bit late today. We were a little bit behind
like
schedule.
the environment in which you practice in, or about your piano lesson. You said.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is actually something I mentioned. I did a Facebook Live thing about this too. Is that we're going to be talking a little bit today about what a piano lesson looks like, or just any private music lesson. Because basically, for most people, not everyone, the way that most music teachers have it set up is that the student comes in once a week. Okay, so if you're a student, you go to see your teacher once a week, whether it's at the teacher's home, or if it's in a studio or in a music store, or whatever. And you spend a half an hour at the lesson, and that's it. And you do that once a week. But the magic happens at home. The magic happens when you are practicing by yourself. And that's what a lot of people don't, or not. I mean, it depends. Some people already know that, but there are a lot of parents. I don't know if you've had this
Yes.
experience, but there's a lot of parents that hire you that don't know that yet. They think,
Yes.
oh, you just come once a week, right? And that's it. No, you have to commit to a certain amount of time every day
Exactly.
to the practice.
And
So,
the piano lesson is actually like an intense practice session. I learned this from a wonderful piano mentor of mine for many years. And she said, okay, well, just so you know, and she had this discussion with every single parent in the very beginning that if their child did not practice during the week, they were going to have a practice lesson.
yeah.
So
Oh,
basically, they're
interesting. Yeah.
just reviewing their
Mm.
assignments, and the progress isn't going to be um, as fast as maybe some others who practice their assignments daily.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it kind of depends on how the teacher wants to manage that. Like, because
Exactly.
that's another question we can talk about too. What do you
Mhm.
do with students that don't practice? Do you want to
Well,
go
we
there?
talked about that last
Oh, we did.
the ruler is kidding.
Oh,
Um, we have this thing
we're
about a
gonna keep
ruler.
doing that again
I
and
had a
again.
teacher that well, anyways, that's another
No,
podcast.
tell
But
me. Okay.
anyways, um, yeah, I always have to have that open communication with the parent and the student, and I always ask the student, how was your week? Maybe they had a pet pass away, or a family member pass away,
Yeah.
or something very life altering. So I always like to know uh what their schedule is, as far as sports and school, because that can have an effect and impact on their practice. And then there's a little bit more, then I can kind of, I think, cater their lessons to that schedule a little bit, maybe not assign as much, so they could feel successful about what they're doing at home, and they're
Yeah.
not overloaded with assignments that they can only practice halfway through.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I think that, like we said, the communication with
Mm,
the parent and the teacher and the student are pretty important.
yeah.
But yeah, for students that do not practice, though, I usually like to um, have a discussion with them, and seeing if there is something that's holding them back. And like I said last week, I think it was that piano is 80% motivation.
Mhm.
I think it was 2 weeks ago, but I learned this at
Yeah.
a music teacher workshop um, several years ago with Jane Bastian. He's a world renowned music composer, editor, and so forth. So that was very good advice. So maybe having that motivational piece in their program. So maybe they need to have maybe a little Disney piece, or something that's considered, they like to have us fun, along with their other assignments, such as scales, cadences, arpeggios, and
Mhm.
classical pieces or whatever. So always like to have a favorite song in there to kind of keep them motivated.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it just comes to prioritizing at home. And like I said, I think it's the schedule. So I have to
Mhm.
make kind of implement, and like what works for me may not work for someone else, but I do like to share that advice, or
Mhm.
what I've
Yeah.
done. But on the other hand, too, real quick, is I like to also give them a 3-week grace period.
Yeah.
So it gives
Good.
them time to improve, and maybe
Mhm.
put their, practice is more of a priority.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if it doesn't, then we have the discussion where, we could still stay friends and have fun. You
Yeah.
could still play the piano at home, but
Mhm.
it's a better use of everybody's time, and of course the parents' finances and money,
Oh yeah,
to
definitely.
make sure that that money is being uh, put in a right way, and they're getting the
Mhm.
most out of their
Yeah,
money for sure.
and that the parents are getting their money's worth too, because
Exactly.
it is expensive, and
Yes.
because for some reason music teachers have to pay their bills too, and I know it's a cost, I know, but
Yeah,
it's also we have decades of years of experience playing our instruments, so that's why we part of how we justify that, other
exactly.
than that we need to eat, but yeah, so it's but I
And
re-
your coffee.
and you got to have
That's
coffee. You're right.
another blooper. You
That's
should
another.
watch that. He's
Yeah,
got
yeah,
a
yeah.
little tally thing going with the coffee.
So
But
here's the
anyways.
secret. She doesn't have anything in her cup. It's just empty for show.
Oh my
But I
gosh.
have actual coffee in here. I don't know if you can,
Oh my gosh.
but anyway. I had to spill the beans. I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay.
But that's okay. So here is I really like what you said about the how you suggested the 3-week grace period too.
Yes, yes.
And as far as for me, students who don't practice, I actually have it in my contract saying that they have to practice.
Yes,
The
me too.
contract, yeah, that I have
Yes,
with the parents. So
exactly.
most teachers will give you a contract. If you hire a piano teacher or whatever, they will give you a little thing. It's not like 200 pages long. It's just a page saying this is how much we charge. This is when it's due. This is how the payments work. Um, some of them have late fees, for example.
Hmm.
All really reasonable stuff. Just like anything
Hmm.
else. And in my contract, it says that the student will practice 6 days a week, 30 minutes a day, which to some people think 6 days is a little much, but I like to push people a little bit. And the exception is if you're going camping or something. Obviously, that's an exception because you can't take a piano camping with you.
You can't?
I've tried. It's crazy. I broke my back almost. Yeah,
Where's
and
electrical apple?
it scared the bears away. So
You bring an electrical keyboard with a generator.
no,
Just
I mean
kidding.
like a grand piano, like acoustic grand
Oh,
piano,
wow.
and take it in
Yeah,
the
I
woods.
remember I had a student
Really?
who like, well, I can start maybe like on an organ, and Thor was like, no way.
Oh,
Yeah, remember that?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Did I say no way?
Yeah, well, pretty much.
Oh
You're pretty
wow.
close to that, but
I don't remember.
anyways, yeah, I
You're
remember.
probably right though.
Yeah, you remember I showed you like in a text, like he's like at
Oh
your level
wow.
now, Yankee Doodle Dandy. Remember?
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah.
I just like being disagreeable. That's what I like to do. It's
Well,
like a
anyways,
hobby.
back to what we were talking
Yeah, back to what we were
about.
saying. So
Um,
right, did you
so
want
that
to
was, yeah.
finish?
So I require my students to practice 5 days a week. It depends on the level too and the age of the student. So it could vary anywhere from like 20 minutes a day to 30 minutes a day to 45 minutes a day to an hour a day. I usually like to use the rule of thumb, however long the lesson is, and of course I take the age
Yeah.
into consideration. But yeah, I really feel like if the student is not progressing or they're not practicing at home, and trust me, we can tell if you've practiced or not. I've been doing this a very long time
Yeah.
because, like I said in other podcasts, I'm old. And
Please.
and so anyways, I mean I've been teaching since about, I don't know. Well, I started when I was just like in junior college, but
So a
just
couple
a
of years
few
ago.
students. Yeah, like 2000.
Oh
Wow,
wow.
what year are we in now? Like 2020,
Something like that.
something like that. So I've been teaching a little bit. I told another podcast over 15 years. I was just trying to make sure people like can really actually guess my age. But anyways, what I've been getting to say is we can tell how long uh, or how much a
Yeah.
student's been practicing, and so with me, um, I always ask my students, well, how much time did you practice? And I usually have an assignment page in which they can record their allotted time of practice. So if they practice 5 days a week, they would just check the 5 days that they practiced
Yeah.
in their assignment books.
Yeah. And I think that's really good too because it keeps them accountable. And
Exactly.
there are some students that really need that structure, especially young people, because they're,
Hmm.
if they're 10, that's the way. Like I know this from having taught junior high, which is insane that I even survived that. But
Hmm.
the kids that age need structure. And
Exactly.
having that structure really helps because it keeps them accountable. It gives them this message that like we mean business. This is serious.
Exactly.
Um,
And you cannot be a good musician unless you have discipline.
yeah,
No matter what instrument you're playing, there's a certain amount of discipline and motivation that needs to be involved into becoming really good at that instrument.
yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah,
and classical, like where you're dealing with an opera singer too, I know that takes, because I got into that a little bit. um it's it's very challenging,
it
and it
is.
takes
Yeah,
a lot of discipline and practice.
yeah.
So
And in the long run, that pays off too.
oh, it definitely
Because if
does.
you watch, because some people watch like professional violinists, for example, that are playing like in a concerto with an orchestra, and they say like, "Well, I wish I was that good." Well, that person practiced hours a day until their fingers bled, not literally, but like they, you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like they pushed themselves and they worked hard. They were getting up at 6 in the morning to have breakfast before they would start practicing their instrument for an hour before they started work, and then they would take the classes. Then they would go to their music lessons. I
Hmm.
mean, there's a discipline there.
And there's also certain
Mm,
sacrifices that need to take place. I mean, if
yeah,
you are a very good musician, there are times where, I could have been doing other things and I had to be sitting at my piano practicing,
Yeah.
whether I was a child or an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
There, and it's
Exactly.
all about choices too. Like,
Mm.
if you want to get good at your instrument, you may not be able to go out and play with your play date every opportunity they ask you to go outside and play or meet or whatever it is. Or I don't know
Yeah.
what they do now, distance Zoom um play dates. My student was telling me about that. I was kind of wondering
Oh,
how that works, but anyways,
really? Wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, I thought that was kind of cool, but
I wonder
I've
if you can
never done
have
that.
like a barbecue, but through Zoom. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
or
I've
people have been doing all sorts of different things
yeah.
online lately. But
Huh.
back to what we were talking about, it does take a certain amount of prioritizing, and then that's what we talked about last week about
Yeah.
integrating that music uh,
Yeah. Into the
practice
schedule.
into
Yeah.
the schedule.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, like this thing about, so first of all, the discipline. I also don't want you to feel discouraged about that. This should actually
Yes.
encourage you, because it's the same thing. I always relate this to sports, and I do that a lot, which is funny because I don't really play sports, but I use this analogy with kids because a lot of kids play sports.
Hmm.
And if you sign up for a soccer team, you have tryouts, you have to work out, you have to run. The coach makes you do this grueling stuff that involves stretches and push-ups and burpees and whatever those things you have to work out and
Yes.
train,
Yes.
right? I don't know if
Yes.
you've ever been in sports in high school, but
Yes.
I know that the coach pushes you, right? It's the same thing when you pursue music, except it's more like mental. It's like
Hmm.
a mental workout,
Exactly.
and the physical part is just like your coordination. So there is a physical a physical aspect of it, but it has to do with coordination and playing gracefully and using technique, proper technique, and
Exactly.
stuff like that.
Yes.
But there is a discipline, but this should excite you. This is what makes pursuing music exciting. You have a coach, which is your
Hmm.
teacher, and your coach is going to push you a little bit, and your
Hmm.
coach knows when you haven't practiced,
Hmm.
just like when your soccer coach knows you haven't been running. They're like, okay, you haven't been doing squat, and um
And one of
uh,
the advice that I have for my students too is when they're practicing at home and I'm having students maybe having a hard time getting to the piano, is telling them, pick your favorite assignment and practice that first.
yeah,
So it gets them,
motivation.
yeah, so it
Yeah,
gets them sitting down at the instrument and then
yeah,
going from there. But at least they have a motive, like some kind of motivation to go and sit at the instrument,
yeah,
because that's key right there,
it
is
is.
sitting
Yeah,
down at the instrument.
yeah. Isn't there a quote like, half of or part of life, part of success in life is just showing up, or something,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
50% of it is showing up? So just show up at your instrument, like sit down at the bench and play something fun,
Yeah.
and
And go
um
from
and
there.
go from there, because that'll
Yeah.
open the gateway to something that's a little bit more challenging later. So
Exactly, exactly. And I always tell my students too, if they're having a hard time like practicing a song, maybe like hands together, to maybe isolate the parts and maybe practice the right hand first and then
exactly.
the
Yeah.
left hand and then right hand and left hand and then however many times it is. But you want to be able to play both hands without any hesitations or stops with a metronome,
Mm.
and then you could put them together. Because
Yeah.
how in the world are you going to be able to put them together?
Yeah.
If with the metronome, if you can't even play your hands
Yeah,
separately.
exactly. Yeah, that's true. And also to when you're practicing, if you keep fumbling over and over, there's another thing you can do besides separating the hands first. I tell my students all this
Yes,
all the time. So if they're watching, they're like, okay, I know, is to slow the tempo down at first
that's true.
and do that first, because sometimes the tempo is already slow. If it's less than 100 beats per minute, it's pretty slow. But
Yes,
the ones that are 120 beats per minute, 140 beats per minute, 200 beats per minute, which is pretty fast,
exactly.
when you practice, you can slow it down. And in fact, you should, because it gives you what's called more processing time in your brain. And
Yes.
a lot of this is kind of common sense, but it's
Mhm.
people want to play fast. They want to play on tempo because they want to get it right.
Exactly.
So it takes a little bit of patience, and you got to do it slowly at first and then get it
Mhm.
right and then pick it up from there. So,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So I think I think just like the rule of thumb too is also to make sure that you have a good like practice environment. Make sure you don't have the TV on, if you can help it. Try to turn off or any distractions
Yeah.
while you're practicing for sure.
Yeah. Privacy. It's really
Yes.
important. And it's also important, like, because the kids have siblings,
Mhm.
and there's babies crawling around, and there's dogs and cats. And
Mhm.
so that could kind of segue into what I was going to say earlier about, oh, yeah, reasons why some students don't practice.
Hmm.
There's a number of them, right? Like,
Exactly. I mean, I had a student who was, he said he didn't like practicing in front of his siblings because they would, sometimes they'd make comments that made him, they weren't like mean or anything, but it made him feel self-conscious.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I told him we'll try to find times, and he did too.
mm,
Whenever, and he did very well.
yeah,
Whenever the family would go out, maybe to the store or something or do something, he would stay at home and practice his piano.
yeah,
And
good,
he
yeah.
said he got a lot more accomplished that way because there were less distractions, and he was able to
Mm.
really focus on what he was doing without worrying about what other people were thinking
Yeah,
about
finding
his practice.
some alone time. Yeah,
Yes.
it really does help. And if you do use a digital piano, which is fine, it's not as good as a real thing, but a digital piano is you plug it in, so it's kind of like a keyboard, but it's meant to simulate a real piano.
Hmm.
And they have them all over. They have them here at
Yes.
Apollo Piano. They also have them at the Music Connection,
Hmm.
Best Buy. You can order them, but you should shop locally. But
Don't go to,
y-
well, I can't say, but
oh, you
I,
can say
yeah, well,
it
it's
to promote
probably
everything. Yeah.
best. If you go to a music store, you're going to
Mhm.
have experts giving you advice on
Yes.
the instrument. And
Mhm.
in our professional opinion, and I think
Mhm.
Thor would agree with this, if you can try to get an 88 keyed
Yeah.
keyboard, if you're going to get a
Mhm.
keyboard with weighted keys,
Yes.
that means the keys will have some touch sensitivity. So when you
Mhm.
press them, you can play them loudly or softly.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Yes.
really important. If you, in fact, I require that. So
Mhm.
because some parents don't know, they're like, "Can
Yes.
I get an $80 Casio keyboard that has like 60
And
keys?"
have you heard this? And I
Mhm.
and I found this out when I got my other piano, because I was really had a really hard time. I may have kept my upright piano maybe a little longer than I should have, but it was my
Mhm.
grandmother, so I felt like some sentimental attachment to it. But this was the key, that I know my grandmother really supported my music, and she wanted me to play really well and do really well. And so there came a time when I traded my piano in for a grand piano. And
Mhm.
I was kind of sad about, but really happy, and in knowing that I was playing on a really nice instrument. But someone told me this: you're as good as the instrument you play on.
Yeah, that's true. I like
So,
that. That's cool.
you have to think about that too. A grand piano, a really nice grand piano like the one that Vince has here, which is a C3 Yamaha, it's more responsive than, say, a keyboard. And when we say responsive, you will tell when you're playing a song like Beethoven, especially when the students get to a certain level where they're playing classical music, and the articulation needs to be executed, and you want to hear the excitement and the dynamics in the piece. You want to play on a responsive instrument.
Yeah.
And you could just go on, well, we're on YouTube right now. You could change the channel after we're done, and you can hear the difference between someone playing the keyboard and
Yeah.
a concert grand. There's a huge difference. We're not saying that you have to go out and get a concert grand, but what we're saying is you want an instrument that will respond to your playing. And the more responsive the instrument is, the better you become as a musician.
Yeah,
Your
exactly.
interpretation, everything starts to develop, and your notes begin to become this beautiful
Well,
picture of
you know
music.
what else is that it'll encourage you more too because
Exactly.
it'll sound better.
And you'll want to sit at your instrument more, which
So
means you're going to practice more.
if you play on an instrument like a really cheap keyboard that doesn't have that touch sensitivity, it doesn't have weighted keys,
Yes.
it's not an instrument, it's a toy. And what that means is when you play on it, it's not going to have that same response and not going to have the same sound. It's going to sound distorted and canned, and it sounds like a toy, right? It doesn't sound like a real piano.
Yes.
You're not going to end up playing that as much
Hmm.
just subconsciously because it doesn't sound very good. You
Exactly.
can't do as much with it. You
Exactly.
can't change the level of volume that you play
Yes.
that doesn't have that touch sensitivity. So
Yes.
if you are going to take piano lessons, yeah, you want to invest some money into something that's nice. Like I said, I know that's an investment,
I always tell
but
my students to this too, if I may just kind of
cut
interrupt
in
a little bit.
absolutely.
Yes, we do that, but
We do that
we
all the
still
time. We
like each
interrupt each
other.
other constantly. She can hear
But
us on the phone. It's like,
this
no,
is
wait a
but
minute, let me in.
but this is the deal. This is the deal, because you got me excited here. This is what I tell my students. A lot of piano distributors or dealers like Vince here at Apollo Piano, they'll have programs so you can actually rent instruments.
Yeah.
So when I have a student that's just starting out, it'll say, hey, well, why don't you, it's like even like with the violin. I know at the Music Connection, I did this with my daughter. I rented a violin for a certain amount of time to see if this is something she wanted to
Yeah.
commit to.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I was able to purchase the instrument because that was something we knew that she was going to move forward with. So you always have that option as a parent. There's always a way, but you want to start out the right way, because if you start out on something that is,
Mm.
like Thor said, it's it's not as motivating or as encouraging for the student to
Yeah.
come and like sit down at their instrument.
You'll end up spending less time on it. Like, and they
Exactly.
make excuses. Like I know because I've had student. Well, I have
Oh
students.
yes, I
No, they
know.
do.
I used to make them up a little
We all
bit
we all we all do, but
when I was little. My mom be like, "Is that the assignment that you're supposed to be practicing?" I'm like,
you don't do that
I just
anymore.
look at it.
Or you practice every day, don't you?
Pirates of the Caribbean.
You
I've,
do
I've
my
got
homework.
this.
I think we've mentioned that every
I've got
podcast
this
now.
obsession for Pirates of the Caribbean. I just love the piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways,
So anyway, this is
totally
like,
off the subject.
just so you know, like 40% of what we say on here are inside jokes. So if you're not catching some of it, it's like
Or
that's
you
why.
could just go back to some other episodes and you'll be able
They're
to
gonna have to
figure
watch
them out.
every episode and be
So
like, wait a
start
minute.
from the Treble with
Yeah,
Missy and Thor and
yeah.
move
Just
from there.
watch them all in order, like a marathon.
Anyways,
Is
what
it
time is it?
Trouble?
I was trying to see what time it is.
It is almost 8 o'clock, but we started 5 minutes late. So you want to go 5 more minutes?
Sure.
Is that okay? Because I have
Yeah.
like 2 things, and you probably have
Go
at least
for
a
it.
minute.
Make
You
your
sure?
points.
You
Yeah,
sure? Okay.
go for it. I won't
S-
cut in this time.
No, that's okay. We can just go back and forth because I know there's maybe something you want to
Yes.
add to. Okay.
Sure.
So a couple things. Here are some reasons why students don't practice, and some of it's understandable, some of it's not their fault, but there's reasons for everything. What is motivation?
Hmm.
Motivation could be because they have a very cheap keyboard that doesn't sound very good, so it's like a subconscious thing. They don't practice for that reason.
Yes.
Some of it is home distractions. They could have an unstable home environment. They could
Hmm.
have parents that are arguing.
Hmm.
They could have siblings that are bugging them. They could
Hmm.
have drama. They could have,
Exactly.
God forbid, like family dysfunction, something like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
That could be a factor, and they might not tell you that. If you're a teacher, they might not tell their teachers that. So
Yes,
sometimes I don't
exactly.
know what's going on,
Hmm.
and you have to kind of be like, "Hey, is everything okay? Like, are you in a room that's just a filthy mess? Like, do you live with a hoarder? Like, there's just, you think
Yeah.
about your home.
Yeah.
Homes are not always perfect.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Hmm.
Another thing could be maybe they're just not into piano, and
Exactly.
they usually don't last anyway. They find reasons to want to quit, and the mom's like, well, I'm not going to spend the money. But maybe they're gravitating more towards guitar. Maybe they want to go into playing something else. Maybe they want to learn the saxophone. People gravitate towards different instruments, and I've seen that.
Exactly. Yes.
So there's different reasons. Other reasons are like people just make excuses. Just like, you know what? Okay, no. I've had kids give me like really weird excuses, like, I don't know. I'm not going to mention anyone because some of them could be watching, but some of them are so trivial. It's like, really? That's your reason? Like, because you were looking for your rubber duck and it took you a half an hour. That's your reason you didn't practice? Like, no, 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 no. You need to give me something better than that. So there
Hmm.
are reasons, but when you take a musical instrument, like, treat it like you're joining the gym. When people join the gym, they make a commitment to go to the gym every day or maybe 5 days a week, right?
Yes.
You need to treat your musical pursuit the same way. And if you take piano lessons for a while, you have to say, okay, I'm going to practice a half an hour a day. I'm going to write it in my schedule, write it in my book. I'm going to
Exactly.
keep myself accountable.
Hmm.
If my friends say, hey, we're going out for dinner, which
Hmm.
doesn't happen that much anyway because of the pandemic,
Hmm.
but your friends want to go out, say, I'll be there in a half an hour. I got to practice because
Yes.
you have to put it into your schedule.
Yes, and
And
put it in your phones.
yeah,
Everybody has those phones now where you could put things in, or your
yeah,
watches,
yeah.
or it's just that friendly reminder. If you make it more of a priority, you'll find that, and you're if you practice good habits,
Hmm. Yeah.
that forms good life
Yeah,
skills
just
for
like no
sure.
excuses, like don't
Yeah.
make any exceptions for yourself. That's what I do for me. Like we're including ourselves. We practice every day.
Yes.
Almost. Sometimes I skip a day. Like if I've had a
Yes.
12-hour day working, it's kind of crazy, but
And this is the thing too, just to encourage some of you out there that are playing their instruments and are discouraged. When I was young, I remember sitting at the piano being very discouraged. I've read about Juilliard like artists who have thrown their books across the room and like, were extremely frustrated. I'm like, really? They were too. But we all have our moments as musicians, and I am so grateful that my parents really encouraged me to pursue music and to
Hmm.
pursue the piano because I love it. And you
Yeah,
know how many adults I speak to, you know, that tell me I really wish I stuck with an
yeah.
instrument.
I'm really glad you mentioned this.
Yes.
Because like, so there's a point where it takes discipline and hard work and effort, right? But it doesn't take that long either. Like in terms of like how many months or weeks you play or you take lessons, is when you
Yes.
get to a certain point, it becomes euphoric. It
Exactly.
becomes like your quality of life just goes up. And I'll give you an example. I have one student that I think has been taking lessons with me for 5 years now. It's a
Wow.
pretty long time.
Yes.
And I think she's now 16. So
Wow.
I've known her, I'm like watching watching her grow up, and I know all her little habits. And so at first, yeah, it was hard. Like the first few weeks, like she had to learn scales, she had to learn this, she had to learn her dexterity.
Mhm.
But she's one of these people that understands the value of hard work, and now like she loves it. She can't imagine going a day without practicing. She starts going
Wow.
through it. She's like,
Yes.
"Mom, I can't go out shopping with you. I have to practice.
I know.
Thor will know if I don't
It
practice."
it they get to that point for sure.
Yeah, it just becomes a habit, and it's just
Yes.
part of your life, and your quality of life will go because
Exactly.
whatever stressful situation you're going through, that goes out the window when you sit at the piano for the half an hour.
Yes.
Because for that half an hour or longer, because she practiced like an hour a day, I'll
Yes.
tell you.
Wow.
But for that hour or whatever that you're practicing, all your troubles, your trouble,
Your
I gotta
treble.
keep doing that.
Yes.
All your troubles go out the window, and your whole world is just this thing that you're working on with the 88
Exactly.
keys. And
Oh, yeah. I was
really,
telling Thor, I sit at the piano and I lose track of the time that I'm sitting at the piano. When you get to a certain point, that's the way it is. You're sitting out the instrument, you don't even know that you've been practicing for 2 hours. But speaking of time, I know we're running out of
sure,
time,
it's okay.
but there's one more important point I wanna make when you're practicing. The most I think important part of a piece when you're performing, the part that the audience members or spectators are going to remember the most is the ending of the piece. That is the part of the song where you practice the least. So I always tell my students to practice the second half first. Practice it. You want to practice that more. So once we have reviewed the entire song, it's like, nope, you need to practice page 2 first
Mhm.
5 times before you go back and play the entire song on the way through. Because everybody knows the introduction. Everybody can play the introduction, right? That's usually you got da 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 da, and then all of a sudden you get to like into that second page, and then guess what? The song starts to slow down, and then the whole song starts to tank, and then the ending's kind of like an
Yeah.
iffy thing. So
Mhm.
for me, and I know Dr. Bowman does this. He practices has his students practice the song backwards.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
So you practice like well, you'll practice like the last measure, like
Mm.
from the left to the right, and then the measure second measure to so it's kind of confusing.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't recommend that, but I do recommend making sure that you put as much time into the second part of the piece as the
Mhm.
last, and make sure that ending is mastered.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, the person she's mentioning is a renowned, is he a music professor?
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
he's retired.
he's retired, but yeah,
Yes.
it's Dr. Bowman. So, and he's very well known in the music community. If you mention his name, everybody knows who you're talking about. If
Exactly.
most music
Yes.
teachers know him. Um, so yeah, one quick thing, and
Yes.
then after that,
Yes. And we'll say
are we
goodbye.
good? We'll say
Yeah.
okay. So I'm going to make this real quick because I want to mention this too. A lot of people don't necessarily know what a lesson looks like if you've never taken a lesson. So if you're a student, let's say you sign up for clarinet lessons, saxophone, singing lessons, guitar lessons, flute lessons, whatever. You sign up with a teacher, with a private music teacher. So the lessons are like meetings. Honestly, that's what they are. You're just having a meeting with your teacher. And every time you go to this meeting, it's once a week for half an hour. And when you show up, basically the teacher says, okay, show me what you've been working on. And then you get on the piano and you're 5 years old or whatever, and your hands are this big, and or maybe you're 42 like me, and whatever, it doesn't matter.
Maybe you're 40 and your fingers are still small.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I have pretty big fingers. I don't know. But
Go on.
yeah. So then you play something and you say, this is what I've been working on, this is where I'm getting stuck. So you tell the teacher what you struggle with, and your teacher helps you get over those hurdles. and that's the meeting. And then at the end of the lesson, because the lesson's only half an hour, at the end of the lesson, the teacher says, okay, now here's what I want you to work on for next week, and come back to
Exactly.
me next week and report to me.
Yes.
That's all the lesson is. The lesson is not where the magic really happens. The magic happens at home when you're practicing,
That's right.
because when you're practicing, that's where you develop your muscle memory. That's where you develop your dexterity, your coordination, your skills. That's where the growth happens.
Exactly.
The lessons once a week are just meetings with a teacher, and your teacher is just there to kind of nudge you in the
We're
right.
just coaching
We're
you.
just coaching you. Yeah, we're just there
Exactly.
to like keep you. It's basically making sure you don't develop any bad habits and
Exactly.
give you the right books.
I
Like,
know it's like, oh,
yeah,
after like Christmas break or spring break, it's like, oh, geez, Louise, you know what I mean?
yeah,
They kind of develop some, habits at home. It's like, okay, we need to fix that. But that's why you come to us, is so
mhm,
that
yeah,
Thor, like Thor said, we can
yeah.
correct those.
Yeah. And, as somebody that I was initially self taught, I didn't take lessons until I was 16, but I started playing when I was 8.
Hmm.
So figure that out. That's eight. Eight, 16 minus 8 is 8, right? So that was 8 years of bad habits that I could have developed. That my piano teacher said, okay, you need to cut this out, cut that out. You need to do it this way. We
Hmm.
need to develop your left hand.
Hmm.
So, of all the people that can give you advice about bad habits, I'm one that can actually tell you a teacher is really going to steer you in the right direction, and you'll play
Exactly.
properly and professionally. So,
Yes.
okay, what are we talking about next week? Do you have a topic yet? I haven't even
Yeah.
thought about it yet.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking we should maybe do something like, I don't know. What do you think, Thor?
Great idea.
Yeah, great
Well, we
idea.
talked about practice and we talked
Yes,
about theory.
exactly.
Do you want to do? Oh, do you want to do the one about talent versus training?
Totally.
Do you want to do that?
Yes.
That's a really good one.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do it.
And nobody on here is objecting because I can see people signing in and making comments. No, don't do that one.
But anyways, well,
Anyway,
subscribe. Thank you so much for
thank you.
watching us. We really
Yes.
appreciate it. It is a joy every single week.
Yeah.
And I'm glad the smoke is clearing out, and hopefully people are safe, and
Hmm.
we're able
Absolutely.
to move on, and
Yeah.
see you next week at 7:30,
Yes, and practice, because I
and
know some of you are
practice.
watching.
Yes,
Yeah.
we
So
encourage you.
yeah, definitely. So thank you so much, guys,
Thank
and we
you.
will see you next week at the same time.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.
And I'm going to do this right this time.
Okay.
All right.